Hello folks, it's me, DeMontropolis, and for my 200 subscriber special, I will be looking at a new franchise starting with Super Mario Bros., released as a launch title for the NES in 1985. The game was developed by Nintendo, specifically the Research and Development No. 4 department, and came about as a grand culmination of the developer's previous works such as Excitebike, Devil World, and Ice Climber, and used almost every ounce of storage in its cartridge, save for 20 bytes. The final product, known to everyone as Super Mario Bros., is by far one of the most influential video games of all time, because it helped save the video game industry from a 2-year recession, popularized the side-scrolling platform genre, and made music a centerpiece in game design. I know I owe it to this game for all that it's done, and now I get a chance to look at it from a retrospective view and see if it still holds up. And with that, let's go into the Mushroom Kingdom world of Super Mario Bros. The controls in Super Mario games are designed primarily to let you carry momentum across any of your attacks, be it walking, jumping, running, and even after stomping enemies. It's innately good, not just because of Mario's jump attacks, but it's flexible for various skill levels. If you're playing casually or just want to explore for goodies, you can take it slow, but there's nothing stopping you from blitzing across levels. Momentum-based platforming also makes levels fun even when there's no enemies in sight. One of my favorite levels is World 6-3, and the only enemy there is a respawning Bullet Bill who only shows up in the second half of the level. Speaking of level design, it works in the sense that every level has a purpose, especially for a game as innovative as this one. The simple structure of levels proves to be beneficial for making challenges tight enough for both newcomers and hardcore gamers. World 1-1, for example, manages to make a tutorial out of itself, with most objects meticulously placed to introduce the game mechanics without a single line of dialogue. Coins are littered throughout the levels, either out in the open or in certain blocks, and they can reward a 1-up for every 100 coins you collect. While it is a simple concept, it is addicting to get as many coins as you can. Same can be said for the 1-up mushrooms, which are tucked away in hidden blocks, and most of them actually require you to get all the coins in the third level of a world in order to enable the 1-up's location in the next world's first level. I can also appreciate the simplicity of the gimmicks across the game, which include moving platforms, scales, springboards, and the dangerous fire bars in the castle levels. One critique I have of the levels is that most of them feel a little samey. This is mainly because there are not enough theming variations, just amounting to ground, underground, underwater, and castle, with ground being by far the most common and taking up over half of the levels. The levels can also feel samey because of the game's small enemy and gimmick set. So even though one level may introduce a new obstacle, such as Bill Blasters in World 5-1...
Actually, they're called turtle cannons in this game, so get it
Buzz
right.
off! So even though Bill Blasters may exist, you will still be dealing with Goombas and Koopa Troopas the same way as you did in previous levels. Despite there only being 4 graphical themes, the game still manages to look and sound good with a simplistic approach despite the limitations of the cartridge. It's good enough that you can tell what level theming you are in easily, but the game is very sneaky with repurposing assets in different contexts. If you look closely, the bushes and clouds are actually recolors of the same sprite, but that's not all. World 8-3's barricade walls are just regular bricks repurposed for decor, and Goombas, the first enemy you encounter, were actually the last enemy coded into the game, and their animation is literally just a sprite flipping back and forth to save cartridge space. On the audio side, some sound effects are reused for different scenarios. The sound effects for Mario getting hurt is the same as when you enter a pipe, and the sound effects for stomping on enemies is reused for Mario swimming underwater. It's things like these, where you probably wouldn't even notice until someone told you, that helped me appreciate what Nintendo was able to do with the space they had. There are some problems with the game's physics, and although they are rather minute, they are worth mentioning. You are unable to scroll the screen back, so there's no backtracking in the level, and that limits the way you can interact with the environment. Like say in World 1-1, there is a 1-up hidden in front of a pipe that takes me to a secret coin room. If this was any other Mario game, I would be able to reap the rewards of both those secrets, but here, I have to choose which one I want, because I can't go back to the pipe if I go for the 1-up, and vice versa. Well, technically it is possible to get both secrets if the screen is positioned in a very specific way, but my point still stands. While Mario's controls are very flexible, there is one thing that bothers me. The acceleration from walking to running is immediate, and a bit tricky to get used to. While it can be taken advantage of in some areas, like that one super tight jump in World 8-2, it feels like a sense of flow is missing, and the momentum does not feel fully polished thanks to it. Super Mario Bros. Also introduced power-ups that not only enhance Mario's gameplay, but have become iconic with the series. While normally he dies in one hit, there are a few power-ups that boost his abilities. The Super Mushroom makes Mario taller and gives him the strength to break bricks above him instead of just bonking his head against them. But most importantly, it allows him to take an extra hit at the cost of losing the power-up. The Fire Flower also debuts here and gives Mario an extra attack to defeat most enemies besides jumping on them, by throwing fireballs at high speed. They are very powerful as they can kill most enemies in one hit, and it does reward Mario for holding onto the power-up without getting hurt. And lastly, the Superstar grants Mario invincibility for a short period, and given how well hidden they are, you can bet it's useful across the game. There are some downsides to the power-ups though. In this game, getting hurt as Fire Mario immediately reverts Mario to his base form, which admittedly sucks, as the maximum amount of hits you can take is limited to just 2, and you'll have to power up twice to get back to Fire Mario. And I mean it when I say power up twice, because if you grab a Fire Flower when you're in base form, it will act like a mushroom and only power you up once. Thankfully, these issues do get remedied in future games. Lastly, this game has a very limited number of power-ups, as there's nothing else besides the ones I've discussed above. However, I do know that future games get a lot more creative with power-ups, and every power-up in this game basically becomes the status quo for most 2D Mario games going forward. I mentioned before that the enemy set is small in scope, but despite that, I like the enemies introduced in this game. Goombas work as small fry, and given you are dealing with Bowser's Turtle Tribe as the main opposition, most of the enemies are designed after turtles, like Koopa Troopas, and you can kick their shells around to defeat enemies lined up in a straight line, which is fun, especially if you can rack up a combo. And there are variations like Buzzy Beetles, who resist fireballs, and Spinies, whose shells protect them from jump attacks. Other enemies like Piranha Plants and Lakitus help to make the level traversal more tricky, and same goes for stationary obstacles like Bill Blasters and Fire Bars. Then we have more tricky enemies like Hammer Bros, who usually come in pairs and assault you with hammers, but you can either run past them or use the blocks to your advantage in taking them out. What I don't like about some enemies is that sometimes their patterns are too RNG dependent, and it can make the difference with getting hit or not. Hammer Bros are sometimes placed on flat areas without blocks to jump on, and if you don't have a Fire Flower, jumping on them is entirely luck-based because their hammer throws have no pattern or limit to them. Bill Blasters may fire 2 bullet bills in a row without much of a break, and it's quite trippy. Potaboos do not have a set interval in between each jump, so being able to immediately jump after returning to the lava makes progressing through some castle levels more stop and go than it needs to be. There are 2 levels that have bridges with Cheep Cheeps leaping up high, and since you can't actually see where they pop up from, it can lead to a cheap hit if you happen to be in an unlucky spot. This one is only an issue in World 8-3, but there's a Koopa Troopa right in front of a Hammer Bro in a straight line. Unfortunately, the Koopa Shell does not kill the Hammer Bro and simply phases right through him and leads to you getting hurt instead. It would have been such a cool moment to take him out too. Certain assets also have some janky hitboxes that may lead to some frustration. Piranha Plants seem to only have their hurtbox on their stems, so trying to kill them with fireballs is a bit stingy. The hammers thrown by Hammer Bros seem to have much bigger hitboxes, which can make it really uncomfortable to dodge in tight situations. This game has boss fights against Bowser, the great Koopa King of the Turtle Tribe. He is the final opponent of every castle level, and he manages to do this because the first 7 Bowsers are replicas of him created by black magic. His presence is always foreshadowed by large fireballs flying through the final hallways of the level, and during the fight, Bowser usually attacks with fire breaths that overpower Mario's own fire, though later on he will start throwing hammers like a Hammer Bro. He cannot be jumped on, so the only way to beat him without a fire flower is to get past him and use the axe to cut down the bridge and drop Bowser into the lava. Of course, if you do have a fire flower, only 5 hits are needed to reveal a fake Bowser's disguise and or knock him off. Despite the repetition of these fights, each arena has its own set of hazards set up to help support Bowser, and the final fight with Bowser has him mix up his fire breath with hammers. With all this into account, he makes for a good final challenge to cap off each world. Although Super Mario Bros. Is missing a lot of moves from future games, the core gameplay is still here in its basic form. As I've mentioned before, it's running, jumping, collecting coins and power-ups, jumping on enemies, and carrying momentum. Despite not having cool tricks like wall jumping or ground pounding, the game is still fun, and ultimately, that's what matters. For the most part, there is genuine challenge as you progress through the game. Aside from the unfair bits that I've touched upon before, each level manages to build upon what previous levels introduced. I already talked about World 1-1 being a simple and clean tutorial for the game's mechanics, but levels beyond that manage to take those enemies and put them in more difficult setups. Even Goombas will be getting the jump on you by the time World 8 comes along. I will also commend how the game reuses level layouts but with harder setups, which admittedly is only because the developers need to save space, but despite that, the challenge is still balanced. There are 2 castle levels that have a maze gimmick where you need to take a correct path in order to progress, otherwise you will just be looping forever. While it is a cool mechanic, there's no visual or audible indication if you actually took the right path or not. This isn't so much a bad thing in World 4-4, as there are only 2 main choices, but World 7-4 is where it gets really annoying, as the 2 paths have 3 sub-paths within them, and you need to pass through all 3 sub-paths correctly to move on. World 8 is where the game starts to pull no punches, as each level has its own thing going on, but even though there are no checkpoints in World 8, it doesn't overstep boundaries. World 8-1 is the longest level in the game and has many common enemies attacking you in tricky setups, along with doing consistently longer jumps. World 8-2 brings back Lakitu for a bit and has a really cool 1-up placement, along with the most difficult jump in the game. World 8-3 has a barricade aesthetic, leading up to the final castle, and while there are a lot of Hammer Bros on flat floors, there are 2 sets of Hammer Bros fighting on bricks prior, and each of them have hidden power-ups that allow you to become Fire Mario just in time to deal with the Hammer Bros going forward. Lastly, World 8-4 is a maze, but a different one that requires you to use the right pipe to move forward, or you will be sent all the way back to the start, and even manages to throw an underwater section halfway into the level. Given this is the first Super Mario game, it kicks off the legendary plot of what we typically associate with Mario, though the interpretation of it, according to the instruction manual, is pretty hardcore. Rather than just kidnap Princess Peach, Bowser's first invasion of the Mushroom Kingdom uses black magic to transform all the mushroom people into stones, bricks, and even horsehair plants, which is bizarre to think about nowadays because every brick getting smashed is a citizen getting murdered. Our magic of mushrooms, the decaying corpses, their heads being consumed, fire flowers, the magic of their spirits manifested, hidden coins, the remnants of their financial stability being siphoned for personal gain? Who knows? But given that Mario is referred to as maybe being the hero of the story, he comes across as both terrifying and awesome at the same time. But the reason why Peach gets kidnapped is because she is the only one who can actually undo the spell put on the mushroom people. Too bad by the time she's rescued, all of civilization has been assimilated into the hands of her new boyfriend. Whew, imagine dating someone who had to eat your father to survive. This game has a ton of secrets, and it's amazing how the general design manages to fit them inside your line of vision without the need of vertical scrolling. Usually, power-ups and coins are hidden inside question blocks, but become more rare and are just found inside normal bricks, which especially becomes trickier in underground levels where any block could possibly hold anything. There are pipes in most levels that can sometimes be entered to find a secret room with a lot of coins and rarely a power-up. These secret rooms, which are usually underground but sometimes underwater, can also help Mario skip good chunks of the level. There are also beanstalks, especially hidden across a few levels. and once revealed, allows Mario to climb it all the way up to Coin Heaven, a large bonus area in the sky filled with coins. But that's not all the secrets out there. In both of the underground levels, there are warp zones that allow Mario to skip ahead to future worlds instantly, and finding them is normally straightforward. World 1-2 has pipes leading to Worlds 2, 3, and 4, hidden past the normal pipe. But World 4-2 is where it gets interesting. Doing the same strategy as in World 1-2 will take you to a pipe leading to only World 5, but there's gotta be more to it than that. Earlier in the level, there is a beanstalk that can be only uncovered using hidden blocks as stepping stones, and the beanstalk takes you out of the underground into an area with pipes leading to Worlds 6, 7, and 8. Lastly, there's an infinite 1-up trick where Mario can keep bouncing off a shell against the staircase, which was deliberately coded in as a way to rack up as many lives in a quick minute. After beating the game, you can do the game's second quest, starting at any world you like. The main changes are that all Goombas are replaced by Buzzy Beetles, all walking enemies are faster, and all platforms are smaller in length. While it isn't very much, the second quest does add replayability to the game, along with the warp zones mentioned earlier. And you can bet speedrunning is enhanced by both the simple level design and using the warp zones to cut through the game in record time. Without warp zones, I can beat the game in a little over 30 minutes, but if I use the quickest warp zones, that time gets reduced to around 10 minutes. And that's just me going through at a normal pace. I know the most famous speedruns of this game have gone under just 5 minutes, almost to the point of perfection. This game is a two-player experience, but it's not what we typically associate with Mario today. Rather than playing simultaneously, the two players take turns, rotating once the current player dies. The second player controls Luigi, Mario's younger brother, who plays the same way. I find it funny how Luigi's regular palette makes him look like Fire Luigi with the white overalls, but when he gets a Fire Flower, he becomes the exact same color as Fire Mario does. While Super Mario Bros. Has a small soundtrack looking back at it now, it came forward as revolutionary at the time. Before this game came out, video game music was mostly a means of attracting attention, but thanks to the works of Koji Kondo, who composed the soundtrack for this game and is still with Nintendo now, video game music shifted towards becoming an integral and participatory part of the experience. The ground theme is one of the most iconic video game pieces of all time, in part thanks to fitting the game's feel-good mood and remaining a dynamic piece the longer you play a level. In addition to the ground theme, the other songs in the game, such as the underground and underwater themes, have become just as recognizable and have gotten remixed in future games the world over. As far as performance, the game provides a nearly lagless experience, and you'll be running very smoothly throughout. The only times where the game does act up are if you spam fireballs when around too many fire bars, though it could also happen if there are too many enemies on screen. Even then, these instances are rare and don't detract from the core experience. Very rarely is there unexpected jank in the game, but it is worth noting as it could potentially catch people off guard. There was one instance in World 4-3 where Mario just straight up fell through a platform as it was going up, and it was right in the center of it too. Granted, I didn't die from this, as my momentum was carrying me to a lower platform. Lastly, I was playing World 5-3 on the second quest, and I noticed the second platform in this area was straight up gone. I don't know what happened to make it despawn, but I tried to make it to the other side by bouncing off a bullet bill. Let's say it didn't end well. In the end, I have 16 pros and 11 cons. It's hard to dislike this game, for all that it's done to the platformer genre as a whole, and making Mario Mr. Video Game himself. Despite my issues with the game, which come as a byproduct of its limitations and not having a whole lot of depth, it's still fun to go through the Mushroom Kingdom at your own pace, and it isn't even that hard of a game at all. If you ever want a simple but enjoyable experience without racking your brain too much, now you know what to play. So with that, I'm going to give Super Mario Bros. A rating of 7 out of 10. Good. And that's the end of this review. If you like what you saw, consider giving a like and subscribe to my channel. As per usual, I have my Discord server in the description, so consider joining if you like my content. I do want to say that I am just baffled that only 2 reviews ago, I made a poll celebrating 200 subscribers, and now I'm about to crack double that number. I want to thank you all for the support though, especially the folks who helped me develop the first guest character for the reviews. So with how fast I'm growing as a channel, I probably won't host subscriber polls anymore. But no need to worry, my next video is going to be another definitive boss guide covering Mega Man 2. I can't wait to start data crunching that one. And with that said, I'll be signing off. Take care, folks.